All right, welcome guys to another video podcast. I'm PJS. I just want to say thanks for tuning in. If you guys are watching, as you guys know, I got a YouTube channel. For those of you new here, go ahead and check it out. I got a lot of variety. I kind of call my channel a variety show. And so if you're into coffee or even into hip hop, I got some cool stuff there. So go ahead, check it out. Subscribe if you want. But today, I got another friend of mine on the podcast. His name is Dan Matsuoka. And we have a little bit of history that we'll talk about. He's from, oh my gosh, he just told me the name of the church. Okay, so I'm going to have a repeat, okay, because I don't want to botch it. I know the abbreviation CCISC or something like that. But let me bring in my friend Dan here. Here's my friend Dan, Pastor Dan Matsuoka. What's up, my man?
How's it going, everyone? Good to be with you, John.
Dude, tell me that you just literally just told me a minute ago. What's the name of your church, bro?
You don't have to tell everyone that. Yeah. It's the church is Chinese Church in Christ, so the abbreviation is CCIC. There's like 8 or 9 of our churches around the Bay Area, and our specific location is South Valley. We're in South San Jose. So our total name is CCIC SV. If you type that into YouTube, you'll see all of our services that are up there. But that's the name of the church.
Sweet. Okay, CCIC. CCIC in San Jose,
SV.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, rep in San Jose, and that's where
right.
you're from, right, Dan?
Yep.
Dan and I have some history because we both went to the greatest seminary in California, Talbot School of Theology.
That's right.
And there was a class where I was actually the TA. I was grading his papers. It was exegesis of the Gospels, right?
That's right.
With
Dr. Wilkins.
With Dr. Wilkins, the man, dude.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorite professors. And so I totally forgot about that when you reminded me about that. But that was a tough class, right?
It was a tough class.
Dude,
and that's why I always liked you, because if someone was giving me A's on stuff, let alone in Dr. Wilkins's class, I was like, man, this guy is like, I got to be good friends with this guy, because there weren't a lot of A's in my school career, let me tell you. But
dude, I got to tell you the story. I did that for him for I think two semesters. The first semester, and there was like 2 classes per semester or something like that. But the first semester, I graded really hard, and it wasn't because I was trying to be a jerk. The previous TA he had, I actually called her up. I think her name was Erica, and then she actually told me, because I was like, hey, what's some advice? She said, you know what, in the beginning for like the first 3 or 4 of those projects, just grade them really tough, because you need to like set a standard and then like start showing grace from there. And then I talked to Dr. Wilkins. I was like, hey, this is what she said. What do you think about that? He's like, no, I think that's great. Start doing that. So, man, I'm just, trying to be a good Korean boy, and I listened to them. Oh, man, dude, the students, they hated me, man. They hated me. I remember there was one class where they kind of lined up. They all kind of lined up because they all wanted to ask me questions about their projects. And so after that, you were in the second semester. So I was like, oh, dude, I'm just going to start grading much more leniently now.
I had heard the horror stories from before, so I was prepared. And then, when you gave me relatively good grades, I thought, whoa, what's going on? But now I know the truth.
I know, man.
Now I know the truth.
I wish all those old students would watch this and they would know, man. It's like, come on, I was just following directions. Hey, do you keep up with like Talbot faculty right now? Like, do you know like a lot of them retired? Did you know that?
Yeah. I hear bits and pieces. For me, just being honest, once I moved to Norcal, I'm a very out of sight, out of mind kind of person. I had so many great professors. But Pastor Ben's probably the only one that I've remotely kept in touch with, but it hasn't even been that much. And so I hear bits and pieces. I see things on Facebook. And when I saw your interview with P. Ben, to see that Dr. Boersma was retiring, it's been a while since I've been there, so it makes sense.
Dude, like all the guys that you and I know, like most of them are gone, man. It's like sad, but it's like I understand the reality. But like, yeah, man, it's really, really sad. Boersma, Wilkins, Sanukian, it's nuts, man. So I get kind of scared because I don't know if you ever follow the history of Fuller Seminary, but like in the 70s when the faculty started turning over, like some things started to change, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
whoever's
Yeah.
watching, they can study that on their own. So I always get scared, man, when new faculty comes in. But
Yeah.
when I get what's it called? The person that's there makes me happy that I know will hold the fort down in theology is Dr. Gomes, dude.
Yep. Oh man.
Dude, Dr. Alan Gomes, he's like knows every heretical theology from like 3000 BC. So
Pretty sure he gave me my lowest grade at Talbot. Because church history, here's the saddest part is like my undergrad, I was a history major and I did the worst in seminary in the church history classes. So go figure.
dude,
But he did know his stuff. He did know his stuff. I was not prepared for all of his tests.
dude, patristic and medieval theology, that was a tough class, man.
Yep, sure
We're like
was.
reading like Anselm and all that stuff. I was like, dude, what is happening right now?
No, totally. Yeah.
So, dude, you were at the Vine Church down here when you were in seminary, and then after you graduated, moved up back to your hometown. You're here at this church now. What are the ministries that you're overseeing there? Or what is your ministry?
Yeah. So let's see. When I got hired here at the start of 2012, it was the first time that the English ministry went to two pastors. So there was always one pastor, but that pastor would oversee the English ministry. But it's small enough where they would be overseeing the youth ministry as well. And there was a lot of kids in the church at the time, and so they knew they wanted to hire a specific youth pastor. So that was my role for about 4 years. And when our English ministry pastor moved on to another position, then I became the EM pastor. Well, I'm saying EM like I'm in Southern California around like a bunch of Koreans right now. Like we don't say it. We don't even
What
say
do you
that
guys
up
say?
here.
What
But
do you guys say?
we just say English pastor,
Ah,
English minister, right? I
yeah.
mean, yeah. I don't know. Something about talking to a Korean dude from SoCal just like immediately brings me back to the terminology. I'm gonna start like saying the instead of freeways in a moment, because we don't do that up here. But no, but it's been interesting because I think around the time when I became the English pastor, our intern who was also helping with the youth ministry then became the youth pastor. But we've actually we kind of shuffle our responsibilities depending on the season of whatever's going on in ministry. And so I tell people this. I have actively tried at times to get out of youth ministry, and God's just like this giant vacuum where he's just like pulling me back in. And so even though, I oversee the English congregation, I preach 50% of the time. Our other pastor, we split it about 50%. And then I'm mainly overseeing the youth group and just also helping equip some of our music team members right now. So there's a lot going on, but those are the main things I'm involved in right now.
Well, like, I mean, a lot of us, we always start off like in like youth, elementary, and then for some reason, like I don't necessarily think this is like a good thing. I mean, it's definitely not a bad thing, but like eventually move on to like adult ministries. But even for me, like when I was doing elementary, I still
That's
love
right.
elementary, man. Like I love it. So like for you, do you still like enjoy it, or are you like kind of like I wish I could kind of move out of that? Because some people like are like I don't really want to go back to it.
Yep. You know, I think I've always enjoyed it, but I have an uncle who recently retired from ministry. This guy was a youth pastor for something like 25, 30 years. And he's up in upstate Washington, like north of
Oh,
Seattle.
dude, that's
And
where
so I
I'm
don't
from, Washington.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, I remember. Bad flashbacks to all the Seahawks. Oh gosh.
Oh, Pete
You don't want to
Carroll,
bring that up,
please,
but
Pete, come
yeah.
on.
Yeah. Anyway, anytime I would talk to my uncle, because he did it for that long, I think he was double digits in youth ministry in two different places. He was in Idaho first, and then moved up to like Olympic Peninsula, Washington, and just getting his perspective on the joys of like seeing over so many years what youth ministry looks like. I feel like I'm starting to experience that right now. And I used to think like, are there other things I want to transition to? Are there other places God might be leading? But I'm at a point now where I could see myself doing this for a really long time, and I want to approach my uncle's, my uncle's length of youth group years. And I think that's been really helpful for me, and some of the topics that I know we'll get into. I think it's been real. I'm really thankful that I'm still in youth ministry because I get a different perspective from Generation Z.
Bro, no,
So,
yeah, bro. I was gonna say you have a huge advantage to understand that generation right now. I mean, Gen
yeah.
Z is powerful. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know if you know, but they, what's the word I'm looking for? But they banded together and they kind of like toppled Trump's Republican whatever convention out like in.
It's the K-pop stance.
Yeah, like
That's
when I
what it
heard about
is.
that, they all signed up for tickets and ended up not going. I was like, man, this is a powerful group here, you know?
That's right. That's right.
So you have a huge advantage for sure. I think it's great. I think it's when you start doing English pastoring
Yep.
and you start forgetting about like what high schoolers are going through right now. That's
Yeah.
when you're a little bit out of touch, you know? But, for me, like even for elementary, like I still love elementary ministry today. Like
That's
sometimes,
right.
sometimes I tell my wife, like there, I could totally see myself going back to it without any shame, you know? Because, like
Yep.
as Asians, we always think that being the EM pastor is like, that's the goal, as if there's something wrong with being an elementary pastor, you know?
Yep.
And so I wish that I would meet people, especially other Asians. I wish I would meet people who were like, no, dude, my dream is to be like a junior high pastor forever, you know?
Yeah.
Like I wish I would meet people like that, not like see it as a stepping stone. And then once
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I'm ready for adults now. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't like that mindset, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I wish I could say like I had the perfectly holy mindset about it, but it's more, I think there's times where I actively tried to move on to other things, and one thing would come up, and I'm still here doing it now. And now I'm at a point where it's just like I don't want to leave, I don't want to get out of it because I mean, just to put it into perspective, I've got two college students on my youth group staff, and they were sixth graders when I got hired. Right. So this is my very first sixth grade class when I just started as a youth pastor, and now they're helping me out with the youth group. And I got to tell you, there's nothing like that. There really isn't. Because to see them grow over 7, 8, 9 years, and now they have a heart for our youth, and to see the ways that God uses them, I mean, like, it's a pretty powerful thing. You know, like having spent 10 years in SoCal, it's like I used to ask myself that too. And I know there are differences, but it's been a challenge to ever figure out like how to define that. I think one thing is like we're pretty far away from San Francisco here. So like a lot of NorCal is pretty like suburban, right? It's the suburbs. It's, you can't just drive to SF and hang out in the city or find places to, you can't go to K-Town and eat, salangtang at like 5 a.m., right? And don't get me wrong, I love that. If the thing I miss the most about SoCal outside of the people and the relationships is the Korean food. I mean,
That's right,
we've got
baby.
some good places up here, but
Nah,
man, do I
nothing like
miss
us. Nothing like us,
I
man.
miss it, man. I miss it. So, yeah. And so I think, for me, our church is kind of on the very edge of the city where you're kind of getting out into like the countryside. And so like, we couldn't go hang out at like a cafe late at night or go to the city or something. You just had to hang out at people's houses, right? And maybe that's why we're a little more weird because, we had to make our own fun because, it's just, you couldn't just hop on a freeway and go to like the happening place to like hang out. So I think NorCal's a little different. One of my friends from my college days, he joked that everything in NorCal is like 20 minutes away from each other, because we didn't have the same level of traffic you guys have. It's getting there. Well, it was getting there until we all had to stay at home. But
Okay,
yeah.
okay. But ministry
Yep.
wise, do you think it affects it like in a huge way? Like for example, if a SoCal youth pastor went to NorCal, do you think it's going to be like a culture shock for him or her?
Yeah, there might be subtle ways that that's true. I think the bigger thing is that um, we have very little seminary presence up here in the Bay Area.
Right.
We've got Western Seminary Extension, and they do a fantastic job up here. But you can't have one extension campus, trying to produce leaders for all the different
Right.
churches in this area. But the reality of running an educational institution is it's just way too expensive to do that here, right? And so, weird or not, a lot of Norcal churches have to rely on Socal transplants because we just don't have that many seminary trained, people going into ministry up here. So,
How far away are you from like Berkeley and that kind of like epic center of like the hippie movement? How far away are you from there?
yeah, Berkeley's a good hour away
Okay. Okay.
if there's no traffic. And so that's been getting worse over the years. And so, I don't make it up to Berkeley or to SF that much. I'm pretty much down to stay in, my little pocket of the edge of San Jose. When I was younger, maybe I wanted to go up to Top Dog because, who wouldn't? But no, it's pretty far. It's pretty far.
So like how are you and just like your friends or just the culture up there? How are you guys all handling like this pandemic, this COVID crisis?
Yeah.
Is it more because the reason why I ask about Berkeley because that was like the birthplace of the hippie movement, just liberalism,
Yeah.
and is it more like kind of like this is all just like a flu, or everyone just like it doesn't matter, or is it like kind of like locked down, and everyone's taking it seriously?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say we're completely locked down, but I think there's been a lot of both uh, government, but also just social pressure to take it seriously up here. And I think some of that is we're one of the liberal capitals of the world. So, everyone up here takes wearing a mask really seriously. For the longest time, our numbers have been relatively low given how many people live here. I've got my own crazy theories about that, but probably don't need to get into that. But because as a Chinese church, we kind of knew about coronavirus really early on, and we had people wearing masks in our church to service a month and a half before shelter in place even happened.
Well, I mean, a
And
lot of Asians wear masks just
that's right.
normally. Even
Yeah,
down here,
yeah,
there's like this one person that comes to my church like every weekend she wears a mask
yeah.
because that's normal to them.
Uh, uh, yep,
Yeah. So
yep. Air quality in different Asian countries and big cities. It's normal.
what do you
So
think? What do you think? Just about what's going on right now with racial justice and stuff like that. Like, what is the kind of the mood up there, or even like from your church? Like, how are people reacting to it, or how are they?
yeah,
How are you? How are you kind of like absorbing all
yeah.
this?
The how am I with it? I don't think I knew how I felt about things until this past weekend, to be honest.
Oh,
And I can get into that, but I think for me, it's like in a Chinese church, when all the protests began to happen, for my youth group, everyone, was immediately kind of just aware of things that were going on. And the thing that was happening was really difficult conversations at home for our youth group and their parents, because the way they viewed kind of racial injustice couldn't be more different. And I'm not saying it necessarily needed to be antagonistic, but it's just a lack of understanding on both sides, right? And so I immediately got thrown into, I wanted to listen to both sides and just know how to help families who were having really difficult and angry conversations, um, just know how to navigate this time. And so I didn't like, for me, I didn't really have time to think about how I felt about it. I mean, I've done some good processing on it now, but what we did was, I think the first Sunday where churches were starting to put out statements or have specific prayer times to kind of address what was going on, I can honestly say I didn't know what to do, and I found ways to try to connect things into my sermon that week without making like some kind of like crystal clear connection. And the week after that, the guy I pastor with, another half Asian dude, great guy, Daniel Gillum. Um, his dad was did some teaching at a seminary up here. Anyway, he went to college in Memphis, and he spent a year in East Palo Alto where he was constantly around African American families. And so he did a special message on just justice and the gospel, and took us through some of the Old Testament passages about God's justice. And he had a lot more context to know how to process things, at least emotionally. But I think for me, because I was having so many interesting but also painful conversations with families who were just really getting into it over this issue, I didn't have time to think about how I felt about it,
Well, I think I was talking this with Ray, but one of the good things that's coming out of this is kind of what you're describing. Because, again, I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but in Asian culture, typically we play defense. We play it safe. We don't get into conflict, Like when crime happens, we're just like, okay, let the police take care of it. I don't want to get involved, That's why most old school Asians, we're not voting or we're not into politics. We don't really care about that stuff, So the model minority was that kind of idea was real. I mean, that's how I grew up. Just keep your head down low, get A's.
Yep,
and
that's
then
right.
and then just don't cause trouble. So I think one of the good things that's happening right now is exactly what you're describing. Like everyone, especially this generation, they're asking questions. They're like, dude, what's going on here? This is like, obviously it's not right, and now they're getting involved. I don't know if you know Joey Chen. He's another pastor up there.
Yeah.
But they did that like prayer walk protest. Were you part of that? Did you join him on that?
No. Yeah, I think for me, I was caught in between so many immediate conversations in church. I had no idea,
Right.
what was going on in
Right.
terms of protests and things like that. And I know other churches were involved, and I think that's great. But yeah,
But
I
but
mean,
dude, like growing
yeah,
up, growing up, we didn't see Asian churches doing that,
that's
like
right.
never.
Yeah,
So again, there's just another example of how this Asian generation is super involved in understanding what's going on and not staying silent for good reasons, for good
yeah,
reasons.
yeah.
And so I think there's that good that's going on. Was the protest bad in your area? I mean, it was really crazy here in LA when it first began with all the rioting and stuff. But was it bad up
Yeah.
there?
I mean, there were windows getting broken downtown, and there were things like that going on. But I would say, on the scale of what we saw nationally, it was probably a little tamer here, compared to other places. Now, don't get me wrong, there were still people shutting down freeways and not letting people drive up and down the 101. Stuff was going, like, for a good week or so. And so we had pretty significant amounts of protests, but I would say compared to things we've seen on the news, it's probably a little bit less. But here's part of it. It's like in San Jose, we don't have that many African American people,
Oh, really?
and that's where we are different than SoCal, and for better or worse, however you want to define it, the gentrification up here has been real, right? And so if we would say, well, maybe in suburban San Jose you don't have that many have that many black families, but certainly in Oakland you do. Even that's less true than it was before. And when you think about the tech money that's up here, it's like, it's just pushed a lot of not just African American people, but it's pushed a lot of minorities that may not have the same socioeconomic status out of this area, and they're more in, different parts of the Bay or Fresno or Sacramento. And so, there's still a lot of protests going on, but, and that was part of the conversation for our youth with their parents. Is our youth would say, like, all of your stereotypes, like, you make them because you don't have relationship with the African American community, let alone even one person. And so that's an interesting dynamic up here.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that. Like, do you think because San Jose, because there is a less, like the black population is so low, do you think that people are not as affected by what's going on in good and bad ways?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, but I also think what you were pointing out is we have to consider the timing of all this. That even though maybe if you're looking at it from the good side, even though we may not have that many African American people in San Jose, it's a chance for us to try to connect to something that may not be like immediately visible right in front of us, but we can see how important this is nationally and find a way to connect to it, because the timing of all this is really interesting. And one conversation that we had with our every Monday, I get together with our 10th through 12th graders. There's about 10 to 15 of us, and we have a Bible study. And during that time, I just wanted to listen to all of my students and see how they were doing. And I was thankful for this, even though it says a lot about us maybe in San Jose. But I asked them, I said, would we be as aware of the Black Lives Matter movement if we weren't sheltered in place and we were having a normal summer where a lot of you seniors are getting ready to go off to college? We'd be getting ready to go to Mexico for our summer mission trip. We would be having, our crazy youth group schedule that we always do every summer. And, a lot of them honestly said, I don't know if I would care as much, but because we have to stay at home and because, on social media, everyone else who's staying home is taking notice of things, then, we're more aware. And I think we have to consider God's timing in that, right? I mean, it's crazy that because one part of the conversation is Will Smith said it's not that the police are killing African American people at a higher rate. It's just that it's being filmed now, right? And it's not the first time that we knew of some kind of brutality, and yet because people are all pent up at home with nothing to do, there was just a lot more context for people to be able to get wrapped up in it.
Yeah, I think for sure the protests and even the rioting and even just the anger that people have about wearing a mask. I think for sure this lockdown because of the virus has got people just like pent up, and
Yeah.
then they're just exploding because they're stuck at home and things like that. But yeah, what you said about Will Smith, yeah, with all this body cam footage, I agree with what he's saying. It was always happening. It's just now we're seeing it.
Yeah.
You know what is crazy? Like I don't know if you followed the Ahmaud Arbery, the unfortunate killing of him, but I remember that I was watching or reading an article, and then I found out like, what the heck? This happened like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
That seriously blew my mind. I was like, I thought it happened the day it was reported, but it wasn't even until that cell phone footage got out that those two guys got arrested. And I was like, this is terrible, man. That is terrible. And then, I said this in another video, but, I was working on a script. I was trying to work on a video on my channel for Ahmaud Arbery. I was just going to record my thoughts. And then that George Floyd thing happened. I was like, what the heck? And then Breonna Taylor, and then all this other stuff, Rayshard Brooks. Man, but that Ahmaud Arbery one still, to me, I think is crazy that it was getting zero attention. Yeah. Those guys, nothing happened to them until that footage came out. That made me so mad.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in the, people are still waiting for some kind of justice to take place in the Breonna Taylor killing, right? And so it just shows like it takes time for these things to, and I thought, I didn't follow the Ahmaud Arbery thing super closely. I had heard about it, but I thought that also even after the footage came out, there was still too long a delay, at least in a lot of people's minds, for justice to like actually take place, right? And but it's just crazy how long that took. But I mean, like that happened before we were sheltered in place, right? And it just shows that, I mean, like what we're aware of is changing now.
Did you watch the George Floyd video? Did you watch it?
I did. Yeah.
Man, that was eerie, dude. Like me.
And that's not something I normally do because I can't like I just have a weak reaction to any kind of violent thing, like more than a lot of people, like.
Yeah,
And
bro. It was eerie. Like I was thinking in my head. I was telling do you know Hanley Lou? Do you know who Hanley is?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
Hanley. We go back in the day too, but I was telling him like watching that video. The first thing I thought of was like, dude, this is like a movie, but it's not. And I'm literally watching a guy die right now.
yeah,
It was so eerie. And it got more eerie because he's like yelling for his mom and like nothing's happening. Like the cops are
yeah,
not doing anything. I was like, oh, just that emotional feeling I had. I was like, oh, this is gross, man.
yeah.
Gross.
Yeah, I had a pastor friend up here, who was when he watched the video, he was about to go into a praise practice with his youth who were helping him for that Sunday, and he just said he couldn't get through it that night because you can't unsee
Yeah.
something that brutal, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's like I think the thing I've been thinking about is, for those of us who describe it in that way, maybe it's a way where we get to see part of our society who have witnessed a lot of brutal
For
murders,
sure.
where we are so sheltered from that.
For sure.
And it's like, that's not to say that anyone's just going to become immediately desensitized to it. But I remember driving from, I lived in Torrance with my grandparents when I was in seminary. I remember driving down the 91 to get to school. And I remember seeing, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the guy was drunk or if he fell asleep at the wheel, but I remember seeing a van go up the exit ramp on the 91, kind of near Compton, and just completely fall off the exit to where the car came down and hit the center divide, and seeing the guy like convulsing in his car, and a bunch of people stopped and the paramedics came. And, that was just some kind of freak accident. But I couldn't get that image out of my mind for a really long time. Even now, it's like
Yeah.
anytime I drive by there, which is not often anymore, I still have pretty terrible flashbacks. But how much more when it's a cold-blooded murder, when people could have done
Right.
something to
Right.
stop it, and it just shows that that's the human reaction we have, right, when we see something like that. But unfortunately, a lot of our world has to witness things like that, maybe much more than you and I do, or a lot of other people. And it's a way where maybe we get to have some empathy or connection to people who see things like this on a more frequent clip.
Yeah, that was what Alex Junn was saying. Do you know who Alex Junn is? Yeah, he was saying the same thing because I was bringing up racism against Asians and wisdom, and he was saying like, now we have kind of a little bit more understanding of how our brown and black brothers and sisters feel and what they
Yeah,
experience, and it's just so powerful. Like something I think about a lot is like, dude, all these deaths, unfortunate, terrible. There's bad examples of those specific police officers. But I try my best to be discerning, which I feel like most people in this world have lost. I think most people have lost discernment. Isn't it crazy, man? Like you read like one tweet and someone thinks like it's like a PhD doctorate. I'm like, bro, that's just like someone's opinion. Oh,
yeah,
don't get me started on that. But I have close friends of mine who are police officers. I don't know if you have any friends, and I get really sad and angry that they just all got thrown under the bus.
yeah,
Like I don't know if you know what's going on in Mississippi. They're like trying to like take down the police department and like do some kind of like community type of safety. I don't know the details, so that's why I can't really speak on it. But it's just insane, like how they're changing that over where George Floyd died. Yeah, it's just crazy. But I mean, what do you think about that? Because like every day I'm praying for my friends who are police officers.
yeah,
Dude, they share stories with me. It's like, it sucks. Like they're like, dude, we get like frozen water bottles thrown at us. We got rocks thrown at us. And I'm just like, gosh, I wish people would be a little bit more discerning to know that look, these guys, they get crapped on, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it gets me really sad for my friends, and it gets me angry how, like, they just all got thrown under the bus. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I had a really powerful conversation with one of our youth group parents regarding all this stuff, right? And you know, he was sharing with me how hard it was to talk to his teenage and college age kids, and how easy it was for conversations to just devolve into angry arguments. And he actually had a somewhat of a front row seat to a lot of things that happened, a lot of protests in communist China, and he was around Tiananmen when everything went down. And he was saying in China, it's interesting because like the police don't even have to carry guns, right? And that's true. And I don't know if that's still true now, but in a lot of places, like you have people who are enforcing the law, but there's at least some level of just, I don't know, submission to authority that makes the whole process on all sides go a lot smoother, right? And I think like, you know, I think the hard part of the conversation is thinking, you know, we immediately jump to, well, what is the solution? You know, and there's so many layers to why it's difficult to police American society. A lot of it comes from our, you know, he said in a lot of other countries, if they have stricter gun laws, part of the reason the police don't have to be armed or as armed as they are is because they're not worried that someone's just going to shoot back at them, right? Because of all of our freedom to bear arms here, you know? And so I think the individualistic nature of America makes it really difficult to police. And I don't have a great answer to that. I think clearly the abuse of authority needs to be addressed, because, you know, we have way too many examples of that, George Floyd being, you know, the most visible one of it. But, you know, it's just a really difficult question to think about. How do we get people on both sides, whether in authority or trying to submit to authority, to try to work together to be part of a better society, you know? I don't have a great answer for you on that one.
Well, a lot of what you said though, with China and having, you know, they're not wearing what's it called? They're not unarmed.
Yeah.
And following authority. A lot of it has to do with that culture, though. Like our Asian
That's right.
culture,
Yeah.
we grow up to respect authority, and it's a hierarchical system. But America, I mean, you said it. I mean, they pride themselves on individualism and this infatuation with freedom, and
Yeah.
a complete infatuation. Like people like don't want to wear masks. They're so angry just to wear a mask. It's insane. So insane how they're taking it. And I think that's like one of those things that, I mean, that's never going to go away. That's just the way our country is, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really unfortunate. I don't know what's going to happen. I just wish there was just a little bit more wisdom and more discernment. And when I'm saying this, you know, I'm not getting all like Candace Owens, you know, like, you know, I'm not going to that extreme, but it's just a little bit too much reaction right now, too much reaction and not enough like dialogue. It's like, there's the solutions right now are just really extreme, super extreme.
And I think what I've been really thankful to kind of observe from conversations with, you know, a parent and child generation within our church is that I think you can see the fears of both sides coming out, right? And so for a lot of the conversations go like this, where the kids, you know, share something that they saw on social media, or they post something, or they might even go as far to ask their parents, can I donate to this, you know, to this cause, or, you know, try to help out in this way? And their parents oftentimes are opposed to it because their limited mindset is, you know, when we immigrated to this country, we endured racism too, but as you're pointing out, in typical Asian fashion, you just buy into that model minority, you know, status. You just put your head down and you grind it out and you make a life for yourself, right? And because there's not enough dialogue on both sides, I think the fears of the parents is that their kids are blindly joining protest without actually knowing what they're protesting. And so what they fear is that their children are willing to throw out even the concept of truth, where you're considering all sides of something, right? And for the parents, if they grew up in communist China and if they experienced a lot of the effects, after effects of the Cultural Revolution, part of their message to their kids is they're not saying that the killings of, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, they're not saying any of these things are right, but they're saying we've observed this in China where race wasn't even a factor. It was class, or it was just like, that's how broken we are as human beings. And this is part of how you have to grow up and understand our world, right? And so the parents are worried that their kids are throwing out the truth. But I think for the kids, what I'm so thankful for in still being involved in youth ministry is, and this is where Generation Z is really powerful, they have a unique ability to love people who are different than them that I don't have as someone who's kind of caught in between like a Gen X and Gen Z. For me, I remember watching the Watts riots on TV during all the Rodney King stuff. I was young, but I remember it, right? And I have some context that these things have been going on for years, right? But unfortunately, that can make me a little more callous where, I just get desensitized to it all. And so I think what the kids fear is when they hear their parents talk that way, they fear that their parents lack the emotion to connect to really broken situations. And so there's just a lack of understanding on both sides that I'm thankful we're having these conversations because it's a way where that dialogue happens, right? But I think trying to pinpoint the heart issues that both sides are really dealing with, I'm thankful that we've been able to start to have some of those conversations.
You know what's crazy is that I don't know how old your parents are, but like for me, I'm considered second gen. These conversations, I would never have them with my parents.
Yeah.
Like even right now, my parents, they're like 75, 80 years old. They're in their mind. I could just imagine them thinking like everything's happening. They're probably like, yeah, it sucks. It's unfortunate, but they're not like critically thinking about it,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even have a conversation with them. But what's crazy is that what you're just saying, I just thought about how it's nuts that now there's Asian families where parents,
Yeah.
more Americanized like you and I, are
Yeah.
actually having these conversations with their kids. And we grew up, we never had these conversations with our parents, So like we don't even know how to do it because we never experienced it before. I think what's also crazy is that when you were talking about communist China and like there are people at your church who experience communist China, man, that's a pretty crazy perspective right there. That there are parents who have experienced it like on level 10, that is pretty nuts. You're talking about like this generation, how they're not kind of like not like us. We played it safe. We're on the more quiet side. Seems like this generation of Asians are much more comfortable raising their voice. I'm sure social media had a lot to do with that. But how do you think, other than what you said already, but how do you think, even for like you and I, because like for this past 2 years, I've been kind of on my own kind of personal study and journey of like raising my Asian voice, Like I always tell Pastor Ben, him like, sometimes I hate how Korean I am because I'm like so respectful and like I still think if I say something I'm disrespecting, because it's like it's Dr. Arnold or it's Dr. Wilkins, like I can't say anything unless they ask me, like that is so still ingrained into my heart and mind. It's like, I hate it how I'm like just like so like that sometimes. But like, how do you think we can really raise our voice? Not in an angry way, but basically to speak up, because again, you and I, we grew up like we were growing to be taught that you shouldn't do that, just be quiet and speak when you're spoken to. And I think that I'm reading, a lot of Simon Sinek and Seth Godin, and of course Gary Vee is out there. I'm really learning like, okay, not like them because it's a little bit of a different context, and how I transferring that into the church. How do you think we could raise our Asian voice better?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to if insecurity of how people are going to view us is a huge part of the honor shame that goes into Asian culture.
So big.
I mean, if we're not able to overcome that, then, because I think there's so many layers to, my immediate thought, which is not always helpful, is, well, will the culture even listen to us because we've been putting our head down for so long? And even when Asian people do speak up, it's, are we prepared to deal with the criticism that's going to come with it when, we tend to shy away from conflict, right? And so it's like, I was having this conversation with one of my youth counselors over this weekend that really helped me kind of process how I feel about all this stuff that's going on. And part of our conversation was, are we even built for sharing our voice when for so long we've stayed quiet? And it's like, Jeremy Lin's an interesting example when he, when he retired. Or when it became clear that he wasn't going to get another contract. And, he shared really honestly in the media how hard that was for him. And I think that took great courage, but he also got killed for that in a lot of ways where people could view it as, this is just what happens to NBA athletes when their career finishes. And if you weren't the spokesperson for, an Asian person being in basketball, would people... Everyone retires, everyone has injuries, everyone has their career end, but not everyone has media coverage of how emotionally broken up they are about it, And I think he's been a great example of courage in the face of whatever criticism's going to come, But if we're not secure enough in our identity in Christ, then the criticism that's going to come with us trying to use our voice is going to crush us. And, that's where one part of my journey with things is, I got to keep ministering to my youth group, and we just got to keep growing in our faith and in our security of knowing how much God loves us, because if we don't do that, we're always going to worry about the other voices as well. Right. When we try to use our own voice. And, I think it's got to start there, because then it's really hard. I think it's hard for anyone, but I think it's also hard in Asian culture with all the honor shame. It's hard for us to be okay with saying something, knowing that people are going to say any number of things about, because how people view us is everything to us,
Dude, bro, I totally agree with you. I say this in my blog, like punch fear and insecurity in the mouth,
Yeah.
And that's what it really is. And part of my journey was doing that. I decided, you know what, I just don't care what people think about me anymore. Not like in a prideful way and I'm just going to do whatever I want. But in terms of like they might disapprove of, something I say, or even like a methodology, as long as it's not sinful, of course, And so that's part of my liberation. But man, this is just goes back to my Korean side. I still till this day, man, I struggle with approval, how come... Pastor Ben or these guys, I still seek their approval so bad.
Yeah.
And it's such a battle, dude, And there's this bold side of me where I'm just you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing and it's okay. They do that. We support each other. But then there's that side of me where I'm how come these guys are not inviting me to speak at that, gathering? Yeah. And it's, dude, man, the battle is real, bro, know? And I hate it, dude. I hate it.
Yeah. And that's what goes into my skepticism to some degree of what happens when we actually use our voice. Because it's the same thing, when we would take our youth group to Mexico, I would see all the other different churches and get to know the different youth pastors. And I would ask, how come these pastors get invited to come down for a week also to speak when they're not bringing their youth group, and they don't invite me, Now, for most of them, I can objectively say they're all better preachers than I am, so maybe that's part of it, Maybe. But there's something real there where the way you look or the way you present yourself or what other people are used to viewing as a pastor who would come speak for this mission trip, it's built into the culture already, And I'm not saying anyone has any bad intent or racist or racist intent with it. but it's a real thing, and so like I think part of what I've been thinking about with all the racial injustice is, I think for me, I get really discouraged when I think, well, if I speak up, will it even make a difference? If things have been going on, like all these injustices have been going on since I was watching the Rodney King aftermath when I was a kid, like what makes me think that me using my voice can actually make a difference, and I can become totally like nihilistic about it all. And when I was kind of reflecting on this, when a few of us were talking after we recorded our service, it was pointed out to me that the hope I try to inspire in our youth group or just in our church in general to know how much God loves us and how he views us, like if I'm going to go so hard in that area, can I not apply that same thinking to like a world where it seems like there's no solutions, And that didn't cross my mind at all, where in my mind in ministry, I could be, as bold as I want to try to show people, hey, we're listening to the wrong voices all the time. The spiritual warfare that's going on, all the condemning voices that tell us that we're not enough. I feel like the main thing I'm most passionate about is to try to give people a different perspective, right? And so it was pointed out to me by one of my youth group staff who knows me well. She said, like, for someone who's so passionate about helping people see who they are and not to fixate on who they're not, can't we apply that thinking to all the injustices too? And I really needed to hear that, because I think for me, it's really easy to think, well, I can't do that much, or I've seen so many examples of injustice, at least from a distance, does it even make a difference if I get involved? But, if we're walking with God, of course we can make a difference. And we're not used to viewing it that way. And that was really helpful. It's kind of given me at least some firm thoughts on how I feel about things at this point,
I think the advantage that Gen Z has is that they truly believe their voice matters. That's why they speak up. I think I don't know if it's a disadvantage because I haven't studied it enough, but I do believe where they do need some more attention though is what you're saying. Like take that confidence in your voice, but you gotta couple it with the gospel. You can't just yell and bash windows. You gotta couple it with the gospel. And I think that's what not all of them, but I think that's what needs some more attention and focus. But man, I mean they're so good at that, and I wish I had that same confidence, like my YouTube channel. I remember talking to my wife like 3 years, dude. I would talk to her about it for like 3 years. I mean, I really want to start a YouTube channel. She's like, just start it. But of course,
just do it.
All that Asian, like, oh, what will people think about me? What will Pastor Ben think? All that stuff. It's, oh man.
Does Pastor Ben know he's always in your mind like this?
I don't know if he does. I don't even know if he does. Oh man.
Oh man.
But it's so real, man. It's so real. Well, I asked this to all my friends and colleagues that been on this, and let's just pretend there was some way that CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, CNN, they all came to your church, had their cameras on you, and they were like, "Hey, we want you to share something," and millions of people are gonna watch it. What would be your sermon, or what would be kind of like your message that you would share? What would you say?
Yep. Well, it ties in with all this stuff we're talking about with Asian culture, right? And I don't know, maybe I would be hoping that it would be a more like Asian-based audience, because that's my immediate context. But it's Romans 6:12-14. Count yourselves as dead to sin, but alive in Christ. And sin shall have no more dominion over you. Now, when we read that, we think, wait, but there's still sin in my life, right? How can I believe that? But it's showing this is how God views you, because, the previous chapters have shown, like, once you put your faith in God, you experience this peace. And that's how we know we're justified by faith and not by our actions, right? But we so quickly just go back into, like, like, well, what about this? How could God really love me because I did this one thing, But it's a definitive way where God is saying, this is who you are. And I think the power of that chapter, I feel like I'm butchering it as I go, but the power of that chapter that came alive for me maybe a year into full-time ministry was, I was always worried about what I was going to preach about. I always felt like, is what I'm saying make sense? Would Dr. Sanukian be proud? Am I as organized as his book tells us we need to be? But I think for so long, what Christianity was to me was a fear of what I was not, where the gospel, I think it took reading through Romans and being directed in it by some of my mentors, helping me see who I was, and it's really easy to focus on what our world is not right now. But what do we need? Like deep down, we need to see what love and grace and forgiveness really is all about. And when God says, count yourselves, consider yourselves, he's not saying it's based on your efforts or your behavior or your sin or your lack thereof. He's saying it's based on how I view you. And that's what our world needs to know. Like God has a completely different way that he views us and he views humanity. And if we can just accept that from him, that would make all the difference, So to put it in a nutshell, it would be Romans 6:11-14, that passage right there.
Awesome passage. I'm sure Douglas Moo would be very happy to hear you preach on that. If Dr. Sanukian is watching, he might be quoting you some stuff from his book, Invitation to Biblical Preaching. Dude, preaching class. When you said Dr. Sanukian, preaching class just kind of came to my head. The fear. Remember when we preached and then they would just watch us from that little interrogation room? Oh, the fears of that class. Oh, man. Well, dude, that was awesome. Great kind of mini sermonette right there. Hey, I'd always love to end this with plugging your church. People who are watching, I want people to know how to connect with your church and your services online. And so where can people find you on a Sunday? Is there a YouTube channel, a Facebook group? What time is it at? Is it live? Let me know, and then, or let people know right now, and then I'll plug some of that information in the description.
Yeah. The best way to access all of our content is just to go to our YouTube channel. If you just type in, John couldn't get the acronym right, but I'll tell you now. But if you just type in CCIC space SV, you just do a search of that on YouTube, then all of our services since Shelter in Place started is there, and you'll have links to our Instagram, our church website, all that other good stuff. But that's the easiest way to access us. And so YouTube, CCIC space SV, that's where we're at.
Is it live? Is it all pre-recorded?
So our Chinese service is live on Facebook, and we don't have a big enough building or enough equipment or enough manpower to stream 2 live services at the same time. So both services are 11 a.m., but we pre-record our English service the day before, and then we just set it to premiere. And so we're watching it together, live streamed at 11 a.m. on YouTube, but it's pre-recorded.
Okay, awesome. So anyone who's watching or listening on the podcast, in the YouTube description, I'm going to put those links down below. Check it out, CCIC space SV on YouTube. Check out their services. Anyone who's watching or listening in the Bay Area or San Jose, check out this church. Go meet my friend, Pastor Dan here, all right? He's a good guy, and he'll take care of you. He's going to preach Romans 6 to you, all right? And, hey, man, I just want to say thanks for your time. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. And I hope we could stay in contact. We literally just reconnected a couple weeks ago through Twitter. So this was good stuff. And hey, anyone who's watching, again, just make comments down below if you guys are interested in hearing about certain topics. Let me know so I can cover that in my next podcast. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. Keep on following. I'm going to try my best to pump out some more creative content. All right. Thanks for watching and listening, guys.
I ain't really changed like I thought I would. It's like another day in the good. Laid back sipping, sun rays on the pad. Ain't no worries when you're winning, ain't no way to be mad. Cookout vibe, got the whole fam present. Life is a blessing, thankful for every second. Best foot forward, I'm two-stepping. Best kept secret, I'm 2 weapons. Who weapon but I know about it, baby. Thankful for the